Puerto Rico sees its third governor in less than a week as Wanda Vazquez is sworn into office. Brazil's Supreme Court has suspended a decision to move the progressive former Brazilian president Lula da Silva into a prison in Sao Paulo. And President Trump is met with protests as he visits the sites of the weekend's mass shootings in the U.S. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo. This is from the South. Puerto Rico sees its third governor in a matter of days as Wanda Vazquez has been sworn in as governor. The new law used to appoint Pedro Pierluisi as Puerto Rico's governor had been unanimously ruled unconstitutional by Puerto Rico's Supreme Court. The Senate President Tomás Rivera Schatz had filed a lawsuit on Monday asking the court to immediately remove Pierluisi from his post as he was not confirmed by the island Senate. Pierluisi took the position after the resignation of disgraced Governor Ricardo Rosello on Friday. To gain an insight into the latest developments in Puerto Rico, we're joined live by Rafael Bernabé, spokesperson for the Citizens Victory Movement. Rafael, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Wanda Vazquez has been just sworn in as governor. Is she here to stay in office, or will citizens, the legislative or the judiciary branches of government be presenting any challenges?
Well, Wanda Vazquez has been sworn in, as you know, because Pedro Pierluisi has been, his occupation of the Fortaleza, of the governor's mansion, has been ruled to be illegal. Ever since he took over the office last Friday, people have been on the streets here protesting, pointing out that his governorship is illegal and unconstitutional. So this is another victory for the Puerto Rican people who already had removed Governor Rosello a few weeks ago, and now we have removed this illegal governor from his office. Wanda, the ironic thing about Wanda Vazquez is that she has said very clearly that she doesn't want to be governor of Puerto Rico. That should already indicate that she should not be in that office, because only somebody who wants to occupy that office should be there. The other very big problem with her is that she defends the same policies that both Rosello and Pierluisi defended. The policies of privatization, the policies of austerity against working people, the policies of collaborating with the control board, which is imposing tremendous sacrifices on the Puerto Rican people to pay for a tremendous debt. The talk in Puerto Rico, which is basically speculation because nobody really knows what the ruling party is planning, is that she will be in office for a little time, that she will appoint resident commissioner Jennifer Gonzalez, the present representative of Puerto Rico in the U.S. Congress, the resident commissioner Jennifer Gonzalez, who is the leader of her party, as Secretary of State, and then she will resign, and Jennifer Gonzalez will become the next governor. But right now, what we are doing here in the streets in San Juan is pointing out that whoever turns out to be the new governor, we are going to stay in the streets making the demands that we have been making all through this week, that the debt of Puerto Rico has to be audited, that a moratorium has to be declared on payment on the debt, that the austerity policies against working people in Puerto Rico have to stop.
Now, there has been a lot of talk about the role being played by Tomás Rivera Schatz, both in the Senate and behind the scenes in Puerto Rico. What are his motivations?
Well, Tomás Rivera Schatz is a politician of the same party of Pierluisi and Rosello. He defends basically the same policies that they defend. In some cases, he's even more conservative than they are. For example, in questions of women's rights and gay rights, he's very conservative. But he had an internal struggle because he wants to be governor, and he wanted to block Pierluisi from occupying that position. So he has his own mean and very particular interest in blocking Pierluisi from gaining the governorship. In this case, we turned out to be on the same side because we were also against Pierluisi, but of course we are motivated by very different reasons. He had his reasons. It was good that he, because of whatever reason he filed this suit against Pierluisi, which has had the result that Pierluisi has had to resign. But we are in no way allied or have any illusions about the intentions of Rivera Schatz. We are against the policies of Rivera Schatz, of Pierluisi, of Rosello, of the whole gang, as we say in Puerto Rico. They disagree on who should be in Fortaleza, but they basically agree on the same policies against working people.
And finally, Rafael, can we expect more of the same from the new Progressive Party in Puerto Rico after these mass mobilizations? And are citizens rejecting their neoliberal program or just corruption in general?
Well, no, people are rejecting. I think the famous chat which was revealed recently was as we say in Spanish, you know, the drop that made the cup overflow, and people are very upset. They are rejecting the homophobic and the sexist attitudes of this government. They are rejecting corruption, but they are also rejecting the 10 years now of terrible austerity policies that we have been suffering in Puerto Rico. So I am sure that, like all mass movements, the mass movement in Puerto Rico will not necessarily stay at the same level that we have had in the last few weeks. Nobody can stay in the streets that long all the time. People have to have a little bit of respite from all of this struggle. But people are very vigilant, and I think that if the new governor, whoever it is, tries to continue this policy that affect people very negatively, they are going to find out that the people are very alert and are very willing and ready to mobilize again against this policy.
Rafael, we thank you so much for your time for Telesur English.
Thank you.
We have been speaking with Rafael Bernabé from Puerto Rico on the political crisis, the situation in Puerto Rico. Moving on, Venezuelan citizens began the day with a large demonstration in rejection of the illegal blockade imposed on the Bolivarian country by the United States. The mobilization also commemorates the Battle of Boyacá, a decisive battle in Simón Bolívar's campaign to liberate Nueva Granada from Spanish rule. At the march, the president of the National Constituent Assembly, Diosdado Cabello, said the Venezuelan people's response to the U.S. aggression is unity.
I think what's clear is that this is the response of our people. It's the unity of the Venezuelan people, because an act of aggression of this type isn't just aggression against the Chavistas, it's aggression against all of us. The response is one of patriotism, of love for our country, against an act of imperialism. It's genocidal aggression from the United States, an act of genocide against a people. They've tried it against Cuba, they've tried it against North Korea, and against Iran. Now they've tried it against Venezuela, but they haven't succeeded. What they're doing is trying to make our people suffer, including the opposition. It's unnatural politics when sectors of the opposition celebrate sanctions against their own people, designed to make them suffer.
Protests are taking place in Guatemala as tensions rise ahead of the country's runoff elections on Sunday. The Campesino social organization Codeca has been protesting for the annulment of the first round of the elections. There are 4 days until Guatemala's second round of voting, and both the former director and former assistant director of the country's Supreme Electoral Court have been arrested for fraud. Guatemalan President Jimmy Morales has caved into threats issued by U.S. President Donald Trump, who said he would impose tariffs if the country did not sign a safe third country agreement. The agreement means migrants seeking asylum in the United States will wait in Guatemala, making the country a virtual wall. Many are, however, concerned as the Latin American country is among the most violent in the world, and poverty has not been reduced in the last 2 decades.
In Guatemala, more than 125,000 families depend on the coffee industry for work. The crop is a great source of employment. It has motivated some to return from the United States to set up small businesses. So far, they have only seen losses, which means many are considering going back to the north, even if they have to do so illegally.
It's true. It's hard to travel because it's complicated. But I would say it's harder to starve.
The low price of coffee and plant diseases have shattered the dreams of many of being a success in their home country. It's a zone where the contrast between houses can be explained by asking who has families in the US and who doesn't.
Although it's hard to get into the US, it doesn't stop people. They want to try their luck.
As hard as the journey might be, 10,000 families flee from Guatemala to the United States as a monthly average.
Poverty and the lack of jobs, opportunities, education and guarantees for health care are the main reasons people are fleeing the country. In Guatemala, more than half the population is poor or living in impoverished condition. There are departments where poverty is so extreme that people are forced to leave.
More than 60% of the Guatemalan population faces multi-dimensional poverty, and more than 40% of children under 5 are malnourished. The indigenous population is the most affected, as it relates to access to basic services like drinking water, electricity, and sanitation.
Women are negatively affected by the division of labor, although they sustain a third of the economy, and of that third, 67% of women do not receive equal pay to men.
In the midst of these events, and the threat to tax Guatemalan goods and family remittances, the United States has imposed a migratory agreement where it describes Guatemala as a safe third country.
Guatemala is not a safe country. Look at the poverty indicators that make people migrate. Really, it's out of desperation or not finding opportunities. But there are also social violence indicators. The United States is even warning its citizens to take precautions when traveling to Guatemala.
Civil society is resisting the conversion of their country into a retaining wall against those seeking refuge in the US.
They are selling the idea to Guatemalans that they are going to be given a work visa. How easy will it be to get that visa? And how many nationals will be getting that visa when there are 40,000 Guatemalans deported from the US every month?
Two of Guatemala's presidential candidates have rejected the agreement of the so-called safe third country with the United States. However, in the plans they discussed during their campaigns, there has been no word on how they will address the structural causes of migration.
Coming up after the break, the defense team of former leftist Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa dismisses the Attorney General's allegations. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Brazil's Supreme Court has decided to suspend a decision to transfer former President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva from the federal police prison in Curitiba to a Sao Paulo prison. Just earlier today, it seemed as though the transfer would go through with a request solicited by the Paraná Federal Police Superintendent and approved by a local criminal court judge. The Workers' Party says that arguments made by Lula's defense were not reviewed in the process. The party and his defense maintain that the former president is innocent and thus he should not be imprisoned anywhere. The Ecuadorian Attorney General has asked for preventive detention for leftist former President Rafael Correa, former Vice President Jorge Glass, and 3 other former officials. The prosecution claims that the officials in the former Progressive administration committed acts of bribery, influence trafficking, and illegal association. The former president's defense team dismissed the claims as incoherent.
The Attorney General's office has come to this hearing to maliciously says that the former president, Rafael Correa, received a deposit in his bank account of $6,000. But at the same time, the Attorney General claims that there was bribery of $6, $7, or even $17 million in this case. I can't quite understand when will they stop with this nonsense.
Paraguay citizens held a demonstration on Tuesday outside Congress to demand a political trial against the president and vice president over the Itaipu hydroelectric dam scandal. Last week, President Mario Abdo Benitez was forced to scrap an unfavorable energy deal with Brazil that was going to cost the nation hundreds of millions of dollars while giving Brazil greater control of the plant. Over 10,000 Hondurans took to the streets of Tegucigalpa on Tuesday to demand the resignation of President Juan Orlando Hernández. This massive demonstration took place just days after a court filing in the United States linked Hernández to drug trafficking in connection to the case against his brother.
Under the motto "Hulk It Out," health and education workers are demanding he be prosecuted for his links to organized crimes.
We can't go on being led by a narco government that is accused of receiving millions in drug money and of killing people. They don't have any morals to be in charge of our country. We are demanding his resignation.
Protesters also condemned the failure of the justice system, which has so far ignored the accusations against Juan Orlando Hernández, which are part of the case against his brother Tony Hernández, who was arrested in the United States for drug trafficking.
The United States is in a completely different jurisdiction. Unfortunately, here we don't have proper rule of law. It doesn't work at all. We have to wait for the US Department of Justice to condemn him for drug trafficking so we can feel a little bit more relieved.
But for others, Juan Orlando Hernandez's resignation is not enough. He has to pay for all the human rights violations and corruption committed during his mandate.
Besides the trial, we are demanding his immediate ousting and that he pay for all the corruption, for the looting of our country, for all the crimes against humanity, against citizens during his mandate.
The protest ended with heavy police repression outside the National Congress, where policemen and military shot dozens of tear bombs. However, activists have assured they will remain on the streets.
Let's keep fighting, my friends. Until this dictatorship goes down, we will remain on the streets.
Despite repression, a new round of protests have been called all over the country by worker unions and civil society.
Protests calling for the resignation of the country's Electoral Commission chairperson, Jane Ansa, continue in Malawi despite police-heavy repression. Malawian security forces fired tear gas to disperse thousands of protesters marching in the capital, Lilongwe. The demonstrators accused chairperson Ansa of orchestrating electoral fraud in favor of the current president, Peter Mutharika. The Malawian High Court recently upheld the right to protest.
The courts have said nobody can stop demonstrations. We are supposed to hold them in a peaceful manner and unarmed, which is what we are. We don't have any arms here, and we are working very peacefully. I don't see why anybody should attempt to stop us.
A Kenyan woman member of parliament was ejected from parliament for bringing her baby into the chamber. Suleika Hassan says she brought her child due to an emergency and she did not want to miss her duties as a parliamentarian. Other fellow women MPs were not happy and walked out with her in an expression of solidarity.
Today I had an emergency, so what was I supposed to do? Miss Parliament and miss my duties just because for a baby. So that's why I just came with her. I knew that I'd stay here for a while, and then later when my situation is better I could. But if there was a room, a creche or a nursery here, I'd be able to then put my baby.
Still to come, Israel plans to build new illegal settlements in Palestine. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. U.S. President Donald Trump paid two very brief visits to both El Paso, Texas and Dayton, Ohio, just days after the two mass shootings took place, which killed 32 people in total. But citizens expressed major dissatisfaction with the president's visit, as many say he created an atmosphere of hate and has done little to prevent the growing number of mass shootings. On Monday, the president called citizens to condemn bigotry, but members of El Paso's Latino community say his words rang hollow due to his long-standing refusal to call out white supremacy and a history of racist discourse. The El Paso Walmart shooting specifically targeted Latinos, killing 8 Mexican nationals in total.
I don't feel comfortable that he is coming with everything that is going on right now and the things he said against the Hispanics. I think that's where everything that's happening right now comes from.
It's a lack of respect for immigrants, for all kinds of immigrants like us. Not only the Americans, but all immigrants, because he thinks we're invading his land, but we are not. We come for better prosperity and to work and fight for the family, nothing else.
The president's earlier visit to the scene of another mass shooting in Dayton, Ohio was met with protests. The demonstrators rejected Trump's inaction on strengthening gun control measures after 9 people were murdered in the city. Israeli authorities have approved the construction of more than 2,300 new homes in illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank. According to Peace Now, a non-governmental organization that monitors settlement building, Israel's Higher Planning Committee last week gave the green light for the new housing units. International law regards the West Bank, including Arab East Jerusalem, as occupied territory and considers all Jewish settlements there to be illegal. Pakistani authorities announced on Wednesday they have suspended all bilateral trade with India due to their decision to strip occupied Jammu and Kashmir of its semi-autonomous status. Pakistan has also expelled the Indian High Commissioner and announced they are downgrading diplomatic ties between the arch rivals. Authorities also vowed to take the matter to the United Nations Security Council. Critics of the Indian government had previously warned that their decision could intensify the Indian-Pakistani conflict. And hundreds of people marched in New Delhi in support of occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Citizens are calling the hardline move by India's nationalist government unconstitutional and dangerous.
I have come here the way Indian government has basically scrapped an article of the constitution which was there for a long time without any discussion, without any consultation in the parliament. I feel that is not democratic. It has violated all the democratic processes. So in protest of that, primarily I have come here.
I'm not just worried about the people back in Kashmir, but the rest of the Kashmiri people in India have also been vulnerable to violence in many forms across the country. So that is there, and the fact that we just have no idea what's happening back home. People here don't know whether their families are alive or not. There's been no communication, and there seems to be no chance of that happening either. The place seems to be an open-air prison.
And we finish in the Caribbean as Barbados celebrated Carnival known on the island as Crop Over. International superstar Rihanna made an appearance for Grand Kadooment, the last official event. Born on the island, Rihanna is also the country's ambassador. She joined thousands who took to the streets in feathers, sequins, and beads to mark the cultural event. Amid the sweltering heat, residents and visitors chipped to soca music as others looked on. Antigua and Barbuda also wrapped up its final Caribbean celebrations this week. Monday saw revelers in mud, oil, and paint for Joubert, while masqueraders took to the streets in beaded bikini costumes on Tuesday. Children were not left out of the celebration as they also participated in Kitty's Carnival. Soca, drumming, and pan were also part of the festivities. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.